The Velith Dominion had ruled the stars for 300 years. They were tall creatures with gray scales covering their bodies and 4 powerful arms that could crush bone like paper. Every species they met had 2 choices: become slaves or become dust. Most chose to kneel. Those who fought back were destroyed without mercy. Admiral Turan stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the small blue planet grow larger on the view screen. Damwall 7, a tiny human mining colony at the edge of known space. His scouts had found it 2 weeks ago. 12,000 humans living in domed cities, digging precious metals from the ground. Easy prey. Admiral, we have completed our scan, his sensor officer reported. No military vessels detected. Only cargo ships and mining equipment. Population confirmed at 12,416. Turan smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Pathetic. These humans spread across the galaxy like insects, building their little nests wherever they find dirt. It is time to remind them of their place. He had heard stories about humans, of course. A young species barely 2,000 years old in space travel. They kept to themselves mostly, trading peacefully with other races and avoiding conflict. Some admirals called them cowards. Turan called them smart. They knew they were weak. His fleet of 40 warships took position around the planet. The humans had nothing that could challenge even one of his vessels. This would not be a battle. This would be an execution. Down on the surface, alarms screamed through the colony's main dome. Una, the colony administrator, ran to the communications center with her heart pounding in her chest. She was 63 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much of the universe. She had built this colony from nothing over 20 years. Now she watched death arrive from the sky. How many ships? She demanded. 40 warships, Administrator. Velith Dominion markings. The young technician's hands were shaking. They're hailing us. Una closed her eyes for a moment. She knew about the Velith. Everyone did. They did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They simply destroyed anything that could not serve them. Put them through. Admiral Turan's face appeared on the screen. His yellow eyes looked at her like she was an insect waiting to be stepped on. Human colony, you have 1 hour to surrender your population for processing. All resources and equipment will become property of the Velith Dominion. Resist, and you will be eliminated. This is your only warning. The transmission ended. Una looked around the communication center. Her people stared at her with terror in their eyes. 12,000 souls, miners, engineers, teachers, children, families who had come to this distant rock hoping for a better life. Now they faced slavery or death. She thought about surrender. The Velith would take the young and strong as slaves. The old and weak would be killed. Children would be separated from parents. Her people would spend their remaining years in chains, working until their bodies broke. No, she would not give them that satisfaction. Send a message to Earth, she said quietly. Full recording of everything, their fleet, their demands, our response. Make sure it gets through. Administrator, what should we tell them? Una looked at the view screen showing the Velith fleet. Tell them to remember. Tell them to remember every name. She opened a channel to the alien fleet. Turan's arrogant face appeared again, already annoyed at the interruption. Human, your hour is not yet. We don't surrender, Una said. Her voice was steady and cold. But we do remember. She cut the transmission. Turan stared at the blank screen for a moment, then laughed. His officers joined him, the bridge filling with cruel amusement. This old human woman thought she could threaten them. With what? Mining equipment? Brave words from a dead species, Turan said. Begin the bombardment. Leave nothing standing. The Velith warships opened fire. Hana was 24 years old. She worked as an engineer in the colony's water treatment facility, making sure the underground systems kept running. When the first explosions shook the dome, she was eating lunch with her parents in their small apartment. Her father, a quiet man named June, grabbed her hand. The emergency shelter. Now. They ran through corridors filled with screaming people. The ground shook again and again as plasma fire rained from the sky. Hana saw the main dome crack, saw people being sucked into the thin atmosphere outside. She heard children crying for parents they would never find. The emergency shelter was underground, built into the old mining tunnels. 300 people made it inside before the heavy doors sealed. Hana's mother, Suman, was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but alive. They huddled together in the darkness as the world above them burned. Then the Velith targeted the underground areas. The shelter shook so hard that Hana was thrown against the wall. She heard the ceiling cracking, heard screams as rocks began to fall. Her father pushed her toward a small maintenance tunnel, an escape route that led to the old cargo bay. "Go," he shouted. "Get to the cargo ships. I won't leave you." Her mother's face was calm, even as dust rained down around them. "Someone has to survive, Hana. Someone has to tell them what happened here. Go. Live. Remember us." The ceiling collapsed. Hana screamed as tons of rock buried her parents. Hands grabbed her, pulled her away from the destruction. Two other survivors, a pilot named Kyung and a medic named Sujin, dragged her through the maintenance tunnel as the colony died around them. They reached the cargo bay somehow. One small transport ship remained intact, hidden in a reinforced hangar. Kyung powered up the engines, while Sujin strapped the sobbing Hana into a seat. "We have to go now," Kyung said. "The Velith are still firing. If we don't launch in 30 seconds, we never will." The transport burst from the hangar and shot toward space. Behind them, Dam Wall 7 was turning to glass. Plasma fire had melted the domes, the buildings, the people. 12,000 lives ended in 6 hours of continuous bombardment. Hana pressed her face against the window and watched her world die. She watched the place where her parents had been buried burn until nothing remained but glowing rock. She clutched the small memorial chip that her mother had pressed into her hand during those final moments, a chip containing the names of every colonist on Dan WOL-7. Every single name. The transport engaged its faster-than-light drive and vanished into the stars. The Velith did not notice. They were too busy celebrating their easy victory. Admiral Tehran opened expensive wine and toasted to another successful conquest. 11 days later, the transport reached Earth. The message from Yuna had arrived 3 days before them, along with full recordings of the massacre. The United Human Federation had already seen everything, and they remembered. The War Council met in a bunker buried deep beneath New Seoul. The room was cold and gray, with no windows and only one door. 12 admirals sat around a long metal table. 7 generals stood behind them. At the head of the table sat Chancellor Do-hwan, a man of 78 years with white hair and eyes that had seen 2 wars. Nobody spoke as the recording played on the main screen. They watched the Velith fleet arrive. They watched Yuna's final message. They watched the bombardment begin, plasma fire turning buildings into ash, domes cracking open, people burning alive in the streets. The recording lasted 6 hours, compressed into 20 terrible minutes. When it ended, the screen went dark. The room stayed silent. Admiral Ji-woo was 41 years old, the youngest fleet commander in Federation history. She had fought pirates and rebels across a dozen systems. She had never lost a battle. But watching this recording made her feel like a child facing a nightmare she could not wake from. Chancellor Do-hwan sat perfectly still. His hands rested on the table, fingers pressed together. His face showed nothing, no anger, no grief, no fear. Just emptiness. 11 minutes passed before anyone spoke. How many ships do the Velith have? Do-hwan asked. His voice was soft, almost gentle, like a grandfather asking about the weather. Admiral Ji-woo pulled up intelligence reports on her tablet. Approximately 800 combat vessels spread across their territory. Their homeworld is defended by their Grand Fleet, 200 of their most advanced warships. Each one is roughly equal to our heavy cruisers in firepower. And their civilian population? 14 billion across 12 worlds. Do-hwan nodded slowly. He did not look at the numbers. He kept staring at the blank screen where the recording had played. They killed 12,000 of our people. Men, women, children. They did it because they believed we were weak. They left no survivors on purpose. Sir, General Park said carefully, the Velith are powerful. If we go to war, it will cost us. I did not ask for your opinion, General. Do-hwan's voice did not change. It remained soft and calm. Somehow, that made it more frightening. I am simply thinking out loud. He stood up from his chair. His old bones made soft cracking sounds, but his back stayed straight. He walked to the screen and touched it with one wrinkled hand. Administrator Yuna told him to remember, he said quietly. She knew she was going to die. She knew everyone in that colony was going to die. And her last act was to make sure we would remember their names. He turned to face the council. The Velith wanted to send a message. They wanted to show the galaxy that humans are prey, that we can be killed without consequence, that our lives mean nothing. His empty eyes moved across each face in the room. We will send a different message. Prepare the silence protocol. The room went cold. Admiral Ji-woo felt her blood freeze in her veins. She knew what silence protocol meant. Every officer in this room knew. It was the darkest page in human military history, a plan created 40 years ago during the Krell War. Used once and then locked away forever, or so they had thought. Chancellor, she said, her voice shaking slightly, silence protocol has not been authorized in 40 years. Not since the Krell. The Senate banned its use. The cost. I know what it costs, Admiral. Do-hwan's voice finally showed something, a deep, terrible tiredness. I was there when we used it against the Krell. I gave the order myself. I still see their worlds burning in my dreams. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they were wet but steady. But the Krell never attacked us again. No species that witnessed what we did has ever raised a hand against humanity since. That is what silence protocol buys us fear. Fear so deep that no one dares test it. Sir, the civilian casualties will be total. Do-hwan sat back down in his chair. That is the point. The Velith killed 12,000 innocent people to make us afraid. We will kill 14 billion to make the galaxy afraid of us. Admiral Ji-woo wanted to argue. She wanted to say that this was wrong, that humanity was better than this, that they could find another way. But she looked at the blank screen and remembered the children burning. She remembered Yuna's calm voice saying, "We don't surrender." But we do remember. Someone had to remember. Someone had to answer. There will be one modification to the protocol, Do-hwan continued. When the Velith are destroyed, we leave one survivor. Just one. Someone high-ranking enough to be believed. Someone who saw everything and can never forget. General Park frowned. Why? If we're already committing to total destruction, because death ends the lesson, Do-hwan said. Fear spreads it. The survivor will spend the rest of their life traveling to every corner of this galaxy. They will tell every species what they witnessed. They will become a living warning. He looked at Admiral Ji-woo. You will command the Black Fleet. 300 vessels, our newest and most powerful. You will leave no trace of the Velith Dominion. Every ship, every station, every city, every farm. Then you will find their highest surviving officer and give them our mercy." Jiwoo swallowed hard. Mercy? Yes. Doan's smile was the saddest thing she had ever seen. "We will let them live. We will let them remember. And they will make sure the galaxy never forgets what happens when someone hurts our people." The council sat in silence. No one objected. No one could. The recording of Danwall 7 burning was still fresh in their minds, the screams, the fire, the casual cruelty of it all. Admiral Jiwoo stood and saluted. "The Black Fleet will be ready in 30 days, Chancellor. Make it 20. Doan rose from his chair and walked toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle and spoke without turning around. "And Admiral, when it is done, do not apologize. Do not explain. Do not justify. Simply come home and help me carry this weight." He left the room. Jiwoo looked at the other officers. Some faces showed horror. Some showed grim determination. A few showed nothing at all. They had already begun building walls inside themselves to survive what was coming. 20 days. In 20 days, she would lead the largest military operation in human history. She would kill 14 billion people. She would burn 12 worlds. She would become a monster, and she would do it gladly. For Yuna, for the parents who pushed their children toward escape tunnels. For the 12,416 names on a memorial chip that now rested in the hands of a broken young engineer named Hana. The Velith had wanted humanity to fear them. Instead, they had woken something old and dark and patient. Something that did not forgive. Something that never forgot. The Black Fleet was coming, and it would not show mercy to anyone except one survivor who would carry their message to the stars forever. Admiral Turan had never felt so proud. He stood in the great hall of the Velith High Command, surrounded by thousands of his people, as the Emperor himself placed the golden sash of High Admiral across his chest. The highest military rank in the Dominion, earned by destroying a worthless human colony. The crowd cheered. Music played. Servants poured expensive drinks into crystal glasses. Turan raised his forearms in victory and smiled at his glorious future. Then the alarm started screaming. "High Admiral!" A young officer ran toward him, pushing through the celebrating crowd. His gray scales had turned pale with fear. "The early warning system ships have appeared. Hundreds of ships." Turan grabbed the officer by his uniform. "What ships? Where?" "Everywhere, sir. They surrounded the planet. 300 vessels, maybe more. They just appeared. No warning. No approach detected. They came out of faster-than-light travel at the same moment, in perfect formation." Turan felt the first cold touch of fear in his stomach. He pushed it down and straightened his new sash. "Show me." The command center was chaos. Officers ran between stations, shouting reports and orders that nobody listened to. On the main view screen, Turan saw them black ships arranged in a perfect sphere around his homeworld. They hung in space like pieces of a dark puzzle, silent and UNMOVING. No markings. No identification codes. No communication signals. Just 300 vessels painted the color of the void between stars. "Have they made any demands?" Turan asked. "Nothing, High Admiral. We have sent 17 hails on all frequencies." No response. Turan studied the ships on the screen. They were human designs. He could tell by the shape of their hulls and the placement of their engines. But humans did not have 300 warships. Their fleet was small, focused on defense and trade. Where had these come from? "Launch the Grand Fleet," he ordered. "All 200 ships. Form a defensive perimeter around the planet." The Grand Fleet was the pride of the Velith Dominion. 200 of the most powerful warships ever built, crewed by the finest warriors in the galaxy. They had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. They had never lost a battle. The fleet launched from orbital stations and took position between the planet and the black ships. Turan watched with satisfaction as his vessels formed perfect battle lines. Whatever these humans were planning, they would learn the same lesson as that pitiful colony. He opened a communication channel to the enemy fleet. Human vessels, you are surrounded and outgunned. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation. You have seen what we do to those who oppose us. This is your final warning. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The black ships hung motionless in space. Turan was about to order the attack when text appeared on his screen. Not a voice message. Not a video call. Just words, white letters on a black background dot we witnessed. We remember. We have brought your lesson back to you. Then the human ships opened fire. Turan had expected a battle. He had expected exchanges of plasma fire, tactical moves, a test of skill between commanders. He had expected to win, of course, but he had expected to fight for that victory. What he got was butchery. The human weapons were different from anything he had seen. Their plasma fire was hotter, their missiles faster, their targeting more precise. But the real horror was their strategy. They did not aim for quick kills. They did not try to destroy his ships. They crippled them. The first wave of fire targeted engines. Across the Grand Fleet, warships lost power and began to drift. The second wave hit weapon systems, leaving vessels unable to fight back. The third wave destroyed life support. Turan watched his fleet die slowly. Ship after ship went dark, filled with crews who were now trapped in metal coffins, their air running out minute by minute. Some vessels managed to fire back, scoring hits on the black ships, but it did not matter. For every human ship damaged, 10 Velith vessels were disabled. High Admiral, we must retreat. His aide screamed. We must call for reinforcements. From where? Turan snapped. Our other fleets are days away. By the time they arrive, a massive explosion lit up the viewscreen. His flagship shook as debris struck the hull. The Grand Fleet's command vessel had just been destroyed, engines torn apart. Reactor going critical. 5,000 crew members vaporized in an instant. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 200 Velith warships floated dead in space. Some had been destroyed outright. Most had simply been left adrift, their crews suffocating in the darkness as their oxygen ran out. And then the black ships descended toward the planet. Turan stood in the Surface Command Center and watched the bombardment begin. He had done this himself, just weeks ago. He had stood on his bridge and watched a human colony burn. He had laughed. He had celebrated. Now he understood what that felt like from the other side. They are targeting military installations, his aide reported, voice shaking. Only military. The civilian centers are safe for now. Turan allowed himself one moment of hope. Perhaps the humans were not as savage as he had feared. Perhaps they would be satisfied with destroying his military forces. Perhaps new targets appeared on the tactical display. Cities, the great cities of the Velith homeworld, where billions of his people lived and worked and raised their children. Farms that fed the population. Hospitals that healed the sick. Schools where young ones learned the history of their glorious dominion. All of them marked for destruction. No, Turan whispered. No, they cannot. This is not war. This is... He could not finish the sentence. He watched in frozen horror as plasma fire began to rain down on civilian areas. He saw buildings collapse. He saw streets turn to rivers of molten rock. He saw his people running, screaming, dying by the millions. This was not conquest. The humans did not want slaves or resources or territory. They wanted the Velith to stop existing. Every man, woman, and child. Every city and village. Every record of their history. Every monument to their achievements. Every trace that they had ever lived. Erasure. Complete and total erasure. Turan fell to his knees as the command center shook around him. Screens showed feeds from across the planet. The same story everywhere. Fire falling from the sky. Buildings crumbling. People dying too fast to count. He thought about the human colony he had destroyed. 12,000 people. He had not thought of them as real. They were just numbers, just prey, just another conquest to add to his record. Now 14 billion of his own people were becoming numbers. And somewhere out there, he knew, a young human woman was watching and remembering every single death. The bombardment continued for 7 days. When it finally stopped, the Velith homeworld was dead. And the Black Fleet moved on to the next world. And the next. And the next. 12 worlds. 14 billion lives. Erased. And in a bunker deep beneath the ruins of the capital, High Admiral Turan waited alone in the darkness, wondering why the humans had not killed him yet. He would learn soon enough. The Velith homeworld was silent. No birds sang because there were no birds left. No wind blew through trees because there were no trees left. The great cities that had stood for 1,000 years were now fields of broken stone and melted glass. The sky was gray with ash that would take decades to settle. Admiral Jiwoo sat alone in her quarters aboard the flagship Remembrance. The ship was named for the colony on Danwall 7, for the 12,000 people who had died there. Now that name carried a heavier weight. It was also a reminder of what she had done in their memory. 14 billion. She had killed 14 billion people in 7 days. She had not slept since the bombardment ended. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the cities burning. She heard the screams coming through intercepted communications mothers, calling for children, soldiers begging for mercy, millions of voices crying out and then going silent forever. Jiwoo had followed orders. She had done her duty. She had avenged Danwall 7 1,000 times over, and she hated herself more than she had ever hated anything in her life. A knock came at her door. She wiped her face quickly. An admiral should not be seen crying and called out, "Enter." Commander Taiwan stepped inside. He was her second in command, a quiet man of 50 who'd served with her for 10 years. His face was pale and his eyes were red. He had not slept either. "The final sweep is complete," he reported. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. "All 12 Velith worlds have been confirmed. No survivors detected except for the designated target, Admiral Turan, still alive in the bunker we preserved. His communication array is functioning. He has been trying to contact anyone who might answer for the past 3 days." Taiwan paused. No one is left to answer. Jiwoo nodded slowly. "And the survivor team?" "Ready and waiting in Shuttle Bay 3. The engineer, Hannah, she insisted on being part of the team. The Chancellor approved her request." Jiwoo closed her eyes. Hannah, the young woman who had escaped Danwall 7 with the names of everyone who died there. She had not spoken much during the journey to Velith space. She had simply sat in the observation deck, watching the stars, clutching that memorial chip like it was the only real thing left in the universe. "I will lead the team personally," Jiwoo said. "Admiral, that is not necessary. Protocol says." "I know what protocol says." Jiwoo stood and straightened her uniform. It felt wrong to wear it now. It felt wrong to call herself an admiral, a defender of humanity, when she had just committed the greatest massacre in galactic history. "But I gave the orders that killed those people. I will face the last one of them myself." The shuttle descended through gray clouds of ash toward the Velith capital. Or what had been the capital, now it was just ruins. A maze of collapsed buildings and melted streets stretching to the horizon. Jiwoo looked out the window and tried to imagine what this place had looked like before. Had there been parks? Museums? Children playing in the streets? It did not matter now. Whatever had been here was gone, and she was the one who had ended it. The bunker was built into a hillside on the outskirts of the city. The shuttle landed on a flat section of rock that had once been a plaza. Jiwoo led her team of soldiers toward the bunker entrance, a heavy metal door that had somehow survived the bombardment. The humans had spared this bunker on purpose. They had spared Admiral Turan on purpose. Now it was time to deliver the final part of their message. The soldiers cut through the door with plasma torches. Inside, the bunker was dark, except for the blue glow of emergency lights. Jiwoo walked down a long corridor, her footsteps echoing in the silence. At the end, she found a small room with a communication station and a single chair. Admiral Turan sat in that chair. He looked nothing like the proud commander who had ordered the destruction of Danwall 7. His gray scales were dull and cracked. His forearms hung limp at his sides. His yellow eyes stared at nothing, empty of everything except horror. He had spent 7 days listening to his people die. He had heard every desperate call for help, every prayer, every scream. He had heard the communications go silent one by one as entire cities were erased. He had heard the end of his species, alone in the dark. Jiwoo almost felt sorry for him. Almost. She stepped aside and let Hana enter the room. The young engineer walked slowly toward Turan. She did not look angry. She did not look triumphant. She just looked tired in a way that went deeper than bones. Tired in a way that would never heal. She sat down across from the Velith Admiral and placed a small chip on the table. Between them, the memorial chip from Danwall 7. 12,416, Hana said quietly. That is how many people you killed on my world. I memorized every name. Would you like to hear them? Turan did not respond. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. What could he possibly say? What words existed for a moment like this? My father was June, Hana continued. He was an engineer, like me. He taught me how to fix machines, how to solve problems, how to stay calm when everything was falling apart. When your bombs hit our shelter, he pushed me toward the escape tunnel. He gave his life so I could live. Tears ran down her face, but her voice stayed steady. My mother was Suman. She was a teacher. She loved to read old Earth poetry, and she made the best soup I have ever tasted. She was bleeding from a wound on her head, but she still smiled at me. She told me to remember. She told me to live. Hana picked up the memorial chip. I remember them. I remember all of them. Administrator Yuna, who faced your fleet without fear. The children in the school dome who never had a chance to run. The miners who tried to seal the tunnels to save their families. Every single one. She leaned forward, her eyes meeting Turan's empty gaze. We are not going to kill you, Admiral. We are going to let you live. We are going to give you a ship, supplies, and full communication access. You will spend the rest of your life traveling to every species in this galaxy. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You will tell them what happens when you harm humanity. You will tell them that we do not just defeat our enemies, we erase them from existence. Every world, every city, every child. You will tell them that we weep while we do it, that we hate what we become, that it breaks our hearts. And you will tell them that we do it anyway. Completely, thoroughly, without mercy. Hana stood up and placed a hand on Turan's shoulder. Her touch was almost gentle. You taught us this lesson on Danwall 7, Admiral. You showed us that the galaxy only respects strength. You showed us that mercy is weakness. We are fast learners. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Spread the word, Admiral. Spread the fear. That is your mercy. That is humanity's grim compassion. Live with it forever. She walked away into the ash-covered ruins of a dead world. Behind her, Admiral Turan began to weep great, shuddering sobs that echoed through the empty bunker. He would carry those tears across the galaxy for the rest of his long life, and everyone who heard his story would remember. 50 years had passed since the Velith Dominion died. The Galactic Assembly gathered in a great hall that floated in space between 3 star systems. 1,700 species sent representatives to this place, creatures of every shape and size, from beings of pure energy to living mountains of crystal. They came to discuss trade, settle disputes, and maintain the fragile peace that held the galaxy together. Today, they had gathered to hear a testimony. Admiral Tehran was very old now. His gray scales had faded to white. His forearms trembled with age and weakness. He needed a special chair to support his failing body, and his voice required electronic help to be heard. But his eyes were still sharp, still haunted by memories that would never fade. He had spent 50 years traveling from world to world. He had told his story to anyone who would listen, to emperors and slaves, to warriors and children, to species that had never heard of humanity, and species that feared them already. He had become a living warning, exactly as the humans intended. Now, at the end of his life, he gave his final testimony to the entire galaxy. "I was a proud officer of the Velith Dominion," Tehran began. His voice crackled through the assembly hall speakers. "For 300 years, my people conquered the weak and enslaved the strong. We believed that power was the only truth in the universe. We believed that fear was the only language worth speaking." He paused to take a shaky breath. "When we found the human colony on Damwall 7, we saw easy prey. 12,000 miners and farmers with no military fleet. We gave them 1 hour to surrender. They refused. So we destroyed them. Every man, woman, and child. We burned their homes and melted their bones into the rock. I ordered that bombardment myself. I celebrated that night with expensive wine." Murmurs spread through the assembly. Many of these species had heard Tehran's story before, but it never lost its power. 20 days later, the humans came for us. Tehran's trembling hands gripped the arms of his chair. 300 warships appeared around my homeworld without warning. They destroyed our grand fleet in 4 hours. Then they began the bombardment. They did not aim for military targets. They aimed for everything: cities, farms, hospitals, schools. They killed 14 billion of my people in 7 days. 12 worlds reduced to ash. His voice cracked with old grief. I listened to my species die. I heard every scream, every prayer, every child calling for parents who were already dead. I was alone in a bunker, surrounded by silence that grew larger every hour as the voices stopped forever. The assembly hall was completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. When it was over, the humans came for me. I expected them to kill me. I wanted them to kill me. Death would have been mercy after what I witnessed. Tehran laughed bitterly. But humans have a different understanding of mercy. He pointed one trembling claw toward the human delegation, who sat quietly in their designated section. They let me live. They gave me a ship and supplies and sent me out into the galaxy with a single mission: spread the fear. Tell every species what happens when you harm humanity. Be a warning that walks and breathes and will never, ever forget. Tehran lowered his arm. I have done this for 50 years. I have told my story to thousands of worlds. And now I tell it to all of you for the last time. He leaned forward in his chair, his old eyes burning with terrible wisdom. The humans are not monsters. They do not enjoy killing. They take no pleasure in destruction. The woman who delivered my sentence, she wept as she spoke. Their admiral could barely look at me. They hated what they had done. They hated what they had become. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire hall. And they did it anyway. Completely. Thoroughly. Without hesitation. Because we hurt their people. 12,000 lives, and they answered with 14 billion. They burned my entire species because we burned one small colony. Tehran slumped back in his chair, exhausted. That is humanity's grim compassion. They will weep for you. They will mourn you. They will carry the weight of your deaths for the rest of their lives. And then they will end you, down to the last child, and leave one survivor to make sure the galaxy never forgets. He looked at the 1,700 species watching him. Take this warning seriously. The humans ask for nothing except to be left in peace. They do not conquer. They do not enslave. They simply want to live their quiet lives among the stars. But if you harm them, if you kill their people because you think they are weak, they will teach you the same lesson they taught us. He closed his eyes, and there will be no second chances. The testimony ended. The assembly sat in heavy silence as Tehran was helped from the hall by medical attendants. He would die 3 days later, finally released from his 50-year sentence. His body was sent into space, according to Velith tradition, though he was the last one left to practice that tradition. The last Velith in existence died in the human delegation. Ambassador Hana watched him go. She was 74 years old now, her hair gray and her face lined with age. She had spent her life serving the Federation, working for peace, trying to make sure humanity would never have to do what they had done to the Velith. But she still carried that memorial chip. She still remembered every name. And she still woke up some nights, hearing her mother's voice telling her to live, to remember, to survive. Chancellor Dohan was long dead. Admiral Jiwoo had retired 20 years ago and spent her remaining days in a monastery, seeking peace that would never come. Most of the officers who had served in the Black Fleet were gone now, taking their memories and their guilt to the grave. But the fear remained in the 50 years since the Velith died. Not a single species had attacked humanity. Not one. Even the most aggressive empires gave human ships wide space and treated human colonies with careful respect. The lesson had been learned. Hana stood and walked to the observation window. Outside, the stars spread across the darkness like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, among those billions of lights, children were growing up in peace. They would never know war. They would never watch their families burn. They would never have to make the choices that Hana's generation had made. That was the true victory. Not the destruction of the Velith, but the peace that followed. The terrible peace bought with 14 billion lives and one survivor's endless testimony. A young human diplomat approached her. Ambassador, the assembly is ready to discuss the trade agreements. Hana nodded. I will be there in a moment. She looked out at the stars one more time. Somewhere in that vast darkness, the atoms that had once been her parents drifted on solar winds. Somewhere, the ashes of Danwall 7 slowly cooled on a forgotten rock. Somewhere, 100 human worlds slept safely because the galaxy had learned to fear them. She touched the memorial chip in her pocket. 12,416 names. She still remembered every single one. We remember, she whispered to the stars. We always remember. Then she turned and walked back to the assembly hall, ready to build a future from the ashes of the past. The galaxy was watching. The galaxy was afraid. And for 1,000 years to come, not a single species would raise a hand against humanity. Not one.